I moved to a small town, hoping to leave my past behind. The neighbors seemed overly eager to welcome me. Then I found a note. I know who you are and what you're running from. Be careful with new friends. The walls of my new life suddenly felt paper thin. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiring stories. The house felt lifeless, like it had been waiting too long for someone to bring it back to life. Dust clung to every surface, and the echoes of my footsteps on the wooden floor only amplified the emptiness. As I stacked boxes haphazardly in the living room, I paused to catch my breath. This is it, I murmured to myself. A new beginning, a chance to leave everything and everyone behind. Before I could sink too deeply into my thoughts, there was a knock at the door and a tall man stood there, balancing two steaming cups of coffee and wearing a grin that seemed permanently etched on his face. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he said cheerfully, thrusting one cup toward me. "I'm Michael. Figured you could use a pick-me-up after all that heavy lifting." Thanks," I said, taking the coffee cautiously. The warmth of the cup seeped into my palms, but his relentless enthusiasm left me cold. "This town is special, you know," he continued, as though we were already old friends. "Igis, imud. Everyone knows everyone, and we all look out for each other. You'll love it here. Great hiking trails, a tight-knit community, and the best garden show in the county. Speaking of which, I'd be happy to help you with yours. This yard has so much potential." "Thanks, but I think I'll manage," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. He nodded, though I noticed the faintest flicker of disappointment. Getting him to leave took more polite declines and a pointed glance at my still unpacked boxes, but he finally relented. The coffee was still untouched on the counter when another knock startled me. A petite woman with curly hair and a wide smile stood outside, holding a tray of pies. "Hi, I'm Suzanne," she said, breezing past me into the kitchen without waiting for an invitation. I stepped aside to let her in. "I live just down the street and thought you might like a taste of the best pies in town." She set the tray down on the counter and turned to me, her smile never faltering. "You'll love it here. Everyone's so welcoming. And Michael, oh, he's such a gem, always helping out. He's single, by the way." She winked, her tone teasing, but unmistakably suggestive. I forced a polite smile. "That's kind of you. I'm still settling in, though." Susan launched into a whirlwind of gossip about the town, who was divorcing, who just got a new car, and how Michael always managed to stay in everyone's good graces. I nodded along, feeling a growing discomfort. Something about her seemed too eager, like she was fishing for something. When she finally left, I tried to resume unpacking, but the peace didn't last long. Another knock at the door revealed a cheerful couple holding a basket of fresh bread. Behind them, more neighbors arrived, families with children, each carrying something: cookies, jam, a potted plant. Kids ran through the doorway, laughing, while adults peppered me with questions. "Where did you move from? Are you here alone? Have you met Michael yet? He's wonderful." By the time the last family waved goodbye, my small kitchen was overflowing with gifts, and my head ached from the forced chatter. Finally, alone, I leaned against the door, staring at the clutter. That's when I saw it. A piece of paper tucked inside my B.A.G. that M.Y. breath caught as I unfolded it, revealing the ominous words. "I know who you are and what you're running from. Be careful with new friends." The room seemed to shrink around me. I clutched the note, scanning it over and over. Who could have written this? Michael? Suzanne? Someone else entirely? I glanced at the windows, suddenly feeling exposed. The town that had promised anonymity felt like closing in on me. The next day, Suzanne threw a welcome party for me. I tried to politely decline, but Michael had insisted, his cheerful tone leaving little room for argument. "You'll love it. It's how we do things here, he'd said, flashing a grin. Besides, it's rude to turn down Suzanne's efforts. Reluctantly, I'd agreed. So, I stepped into Suzanne's yard. A banner reading "Welcome, Malice" hung across the porch, and tables were piled high with food and drinks. People I'd never seen before waved and smiled as I entered. Before I could even respond, Michael introduced me to a group of people. "This is Alice. Welcome to the neighborhood," a woman said brightly, shaking my hand. Others chimed in with questions. Just as I started to feel like I might survive the evening, my gaze fell on a man standing at the edge of the crowd. My breath hitched. Panic surged through me as I recognized his face. Oh God, it can't be. What is he doing here? My chest tightened as memories came flooding back. My legs felt weak, and I hid behind the porch, trying not to be noticed by him. But Michael found me there at the very same moment. "You look pale. I'll walk you home." "No," I said sharply, almost too loud. "Well, suit yourself," he said, his voice clipped. "Just make sure you're choosing your friends wisely." His words felt like a warning, and my mind raced. Does he know about the note? Could he have written it? Feeling cornered, I turned to Suzanne. "Would it be all right if I stayed at your place tonight?" "Of course, dear. Don't even think twice about it." I followed her back inside, hoping I could make sense of it all once I was safe. Once the guests had left, the house felt quieter than it had all evening. Suzanne led me to her kitchen, poured tea into 2 mismatched mugs, handing me one before sitting across the table. "Suzanne, I need to tell you something," I began. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "At the party tonight, I saw someone I never expected to see again." I paused, my throat tightening. "His name is Tim. He was my boyfriend before I moved here." "Go on," she said. I told him I was pregnant. I continued, but instead of being happy, he got angry. He said things, terrible things that made me feel unsafe. I left everything behind to protect myself and my baby. Suzanne didn't say anything right away. When I glanced up, her face was pale. "I need to tell you something too," she said. "Please don't be upset." My heart sank. "What is it?" "I found him on social media a while back. I invited him to the party." "What?" I managed to choke out. "I didn't know it was this serious," she said quickly. "I thought he might help me with Michael. I like him, you see, and I thought if you were distracted, maybe." Her voice trailed off, her face flushed with shame. "I didn't mean to cause harm." "You still to hear. Where is he now?" "He's staying in my guest room, waiting." My stomach twisted. The air in the kitchen felt suffocating. "I need to leave. Please help me." The house was eerily silent as Suzanne and I tiptoed through the living room, each step on the creaky floorboards sounding far too loud in the stillness. Suzanne gripped my arm tightly, her fingers trembling against my sleeve. "Almost there," she whispered. Every shadow seemed to move. The faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen was the only sound breaking the silence. I held my breath, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. Then the doorbell rang. Before either of us could react, the lights in the living room flickered on. "Hello, Alice," a familiar voice said. Tim stood in the middle of the room. Suzanne screamed. Before I could find the words to speak, another voice boomed from outside. "What's going on in there?" The door burst open, and Michael stormed in, holding a can of pepper spray like a weapon. Tim raised his hand slowly, his movements deliberate. "Relax," he said, his voice calm. Michael didn't lower the spray, but stayed frozen in place, glaring at Tim. "Who are you? Who let you in?" Michael asked nervously. "I just want to talk," Tim said, his eyes locking onto mine. "Alice, please." "Alice? Do you know him?" Michael lost his temper. I stood rooted to the spot, unable to speak, unable to run. Tim stepped forward cautiously, keeping his hands visible. "I made a mistake. I was scared. Stupid. When you told me about the baby, I didn't know how to handle it. But I've spent months regretting it, Alice. Every day. He reached into his pocket, and Michael tensed, raising the pepper spray again. It's just my phone, Tim said quickly, pulling it out. A series of photos filled the screen. A small room painted in soft pastel colors, a crib, shelves of neatly arranged toys, and a rocking chair by the window. I've been preparing for you and the baby, he said quietly. I hope you come back someday. I felt Suzanne step back, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh my God, I didn't know it was like this. I thought. I swallowed hard, guilt tightening in my chest. Suzanne, I need to tell you the truth. Tim wasn't the threat I made him out to be. When I told him about the baby, he was scared, and I was furious. I twisted things because it was easier to be angry than admit I was scared too. Her expression softened, though her eyes stayed wary. I forced myself to continue. He never hurt me or threatened me. I'm sorry, Suzanne. I'm sorry, Tim. I let my emotions take over. I was overthinking things all this time. For a moment, we sat in silence. I love you, Tim said simply. I want to make things right. To my shock, Tim dropped to one knee. Alice, will you marry me? Tears filled my eyes as I nodded. Yes. All the anger and fear began to crack, fading into something softer. Tim wasn't perfect, and neither was I, but maybe that was okay. Michael lowered the pepper spray, muttering, "About time this circus wrapped up." Suzanne laughed nervously. Okay, maybe I went a little overboard with my meddling. Michael raised an eyebrow. A little. We laughed, the tension dissolving into quiet ease. Michael's steady kindness met Suzanne's nervous warmth, and in their shared smiles, something new began. That night, we were drinking tea and talking about the simple things that make us happy.